Former Eagle Brian Westbrook joining us now. Brian, good morning. Look, we've been talking about this all week. Doug Pederson finally making the decision to go with Jalen Hurts. What do you make of it?
Well, good morning, Jenna. And when you talk about this decision, to me, this may be the only decision that could possibly, and I mean possibly, save Doug Pederson's job as the head coach. The owner wants to see wins. They look really bad offensively, and as a team, these last few games here, last 4 games or so, this may be the only thing that could save his job. It also could only be maybe only one of the things that he could have done that could actually save face in the locker room. And Brandon, you know this, as a veteran on that football team, I go out every single day. I bust my butt in practice. And if I play well, I should continue to start. If I don't play well, then I should be taken out. And the same thing should be said for Carson Wentz. And Carson Wentz has just not played very well this season at all. When you look at this offense over the last 4 games, they haven't scored over 17 points in any of those games. Carson Wentz, in the 12 games that he started, he only has 2 games where he has over 260 yards passing. That's just not very good quarterbacking. But quite honestly, the numbers don't necessarily tell the entire story. Carson Wentz, he has looked confused at times when looking at defenses, not understanding where to get the ball to. He's held the ball way too long. And then when he's had guys open, he's been hesitant to pull the trigger. So as I watch Carson in this offense, they look bad. And part of that is Doug Pederson. And the move to Jalen Hurts may be the only decision that could certainly save his job. And that's a big-time possibility for Doug Pederson.
Yeah, B, you're right there. I think this is a good decision, and it might be a week too late. Jalen Hurts is a baller. Last year, he had 52 touchdowns, and he was second in the Heisman race to Joe Burrow. This kid can absolutely play. And I truly believe we haven't seen the best of him. Obviously, he's still young. He hasn't hit his prime. But I don't think we know who this kid is. Nick, you talked about it earlier, his time in Alabama and then in Oklahoma. This kid is something special. There's a lot of guys that walk in that locker room and you just know right away, like, man, there's nothing good about this kid. You know, he doesn't pass the eye test. But then there's some people that walk in and they just command the respect of all their peers. They command the huddle. They just have this natural ability to make guys fall in line and follow him. You go back to this last game, look at his poise, look at his demeanor on the sideline, look at him being able to take off when things are breaking down, and then also look good throwing the ball. Him and Alshon Jeffrey looked like they were trying to develop some good chemistry within the game. They were just a few things off from having a really nice connection. So I think this is good. And wow, it's like I do think this can spark this organization. I do think this can spark this offense. The Saints, that's a whole nother debate. That's a whole nother conversation. But the Saints, they're playing well right now. I don't think this is a great game for him to enter. This is a great week for him to enter into this whole, quarterback starting position. By the end of the day, I think if you ride this out with them, he will show you that he can ball, and he can ball in this NFL for a very long time.
Okay, well, here's the thing about a spark when you're starting to start a fire. Hey, spark, either catches fire or it doesn't. So, Brian, what happens if it doesn't? What happens if this Saints defense, which is tremendous, shuts down Jalen Hurts, and Jalen Hurts looks really bad? Last week, Matt Ryan completed 19 passes, 16 points. The great Tom Brady, who knows how to read defenses better than Jalen Hurts, had 3 interceptions, 3 points. We saw Tua, who earned the job and was obviously like the quarterback of the future, and Fitzmagic was just like, the stopgap. Well, they went to Tua for 15 quarters. He got sacked 6 times, and they're like, you know what? Sit down. We're going to bring Fitzmagic back in. So I know if it works out well and Jalen is great, I think everybody will be happy. But to do this experiment or to make this change against the Saints, what would you do if Jalen is really struggling? Do you keep Wentz there because now you've just created chaos, or you just ride with Jalen throughout the game no matter what?
Kevin, I think at this point, you just have to ride with Jalen Hurts at this point. You don't want to go back and forth with your quarterback and your first-team quarterback, your second-team quarterback. That just makes it for a bigger mess. And I think you're right. This is a terrible opponent to have your first start for a rookie against a team that really held Matt Ryan and the Falcons to 25 points combined in their 2 meetings. And, of course, a team that held Tom Brady and that offense to 3 points when they played them last. And so, yeah, it's a tough situation. But sometimes you do get a spark from a young guy. We saw Tua not only initiate a spark down there for Miami on the offensive side, but he gave them a spark with their defense. Their defense and special teams scored the first game that he played. The second game that he started, his defense scored as well. And so maybe this starts a spark not only on the offense, but the other phases of the game for the Philadelphia Eagles. As a coach, this is the only choice you could have made. This is the only thing that you could have done at this point.
All right, so let's play this out, Brian. Let's assume Jalen Hurts plays the rest of the season. And whether he plays well against the Saints or not, the Eagles have another game against the Cowboys where let's just assume not only does he play the rest of the season, but he plays well. And that there is excitement surrounding him going into 2021. Then the question becomes, what do you do with Carson Wentz? And to me, and I want to get your take on this, Brian, it's very simple. You do everything you can to trade him because you're at the contract he signed, if he's not a star starting quarterback, is a disaster no matter what. So you've got to be able to move on as quickly as possible. And if you don't, so this is, if he's on the roster next year, it's $35 million. If you cut him, you can't cut him. So we should almost remove that line. If you trade him, it's $34 million against the cap. But then it's over. Then you have a clean figure going into 2022. If you leave him on the roster, Brian, as a backup next year in a quarterback competition and he's not good or he doesn't win the job, then in 2022, you're right back in this spot. And the cap hit now, if you trade him, would be $25 million. But would anyone trade for his contract if he hasn't played in over a year? You cut him, it's disastrous. So to me, like, it's a very obvious move. If Jalen Hurts plays well, Brian, you take your medicine. You take the 1 year cap hit of $34 million by trading him, which, by the way, is still cheaper than having him on the roster, and you move on with a clean cap in 2022.
Yeah, Nick, I just completely disagree with you here because, why would you want to trade this guy? $33.8 million is one of the biggest cap hits for a player that is not going to be on your football team in the history of the NFL. No team wants to actually do that. And I want to give you some stats, and I think this will kind of show the message a little bit more. And this came from Andrew Brandt, one of my good buddies here. This is what the Eagles have committed to Carson Wentz. In 2016, they committed a first-round pick and a fourth-round pick. 2017, a first-round pick and a second-round pick. In 2016, that's just the picks that they've committed for Carson Wentz. 2016, they gave him $27 million and $17 million at the signing. 2019, just this past a year ago, they gave him $128 million. Full guarantees in 2020, full guarantees in 2021, a partial guarantee in 2022. So Carson Wentz combined earnings to date is $80 million. He hasn't won one playoff game at that point. They also traded Sam Bradford and let go the Super Bowl winning Nick Foles in free agency. They have the most commitment to Carson Wentz than any other team. Any other team, absolutely a parking spot too. Any other team to any player in the NFL. So they have to have Carson Wentz on this team next year. The other thing is this, and here's an idea that I'm just throwing out there as a resolution. Jalen Hurts plays well these next 4 games, and at some point you say, because we have to go back to Carson Wentz next year because of those big commitments that I just laid out, that you say, you know what? Maybe there's a market. Maybe there's a market not for Carson Wentz, but maybe there's a market for Jalen Hurts.
That's what
because
Brandon
you're right.
said.
You can't have both on the team next year. When you look at it. So maybe that's a way to get out of this whole big deal that the Eagles have made.
Brandon alluded to that. Brandon alluded to that earlier. And Brian, I know you have properties all over the country, so I assume you have some type of house on Broad Street. I'm very curious what the fans in Philadelphia would feel like if Jalen Hurts goes 3-1 and plays well, and they're like, guess what? Remember when we traded away Super Bowl MVP Nick Foles to give the job to Carson Wentz? Part 2 of that. We're going to trade away Jalen Hurts to give the job to Carson Wentz. But the point that Andrew Brandt made and you made there, Brian, Jenna, is that you have invested this much in him. The argument then is don't bench him in week 14. But they have.
So what
and
you're
now
saying,
that they have, I feel like if you have that much invested in him, Brandon, I feel like you just have to stick with him. But they're not sticking with him.
No,
and if they're not sticking with him,
I know, but think about this, Nick. So basically, if we play out, if we go with your scenario, which is not a bad scenario, and we say we just trade him, and now he's hitting the salary cap for $33 million. Now what you're saying is next year we're not going to be competing. We're not going to be any good because you have a lot of holes. It's not just Carson Wentz playing bad. You got depth issues at the linebacker position.
Sure,
correct.
But that's with or without him. He's $34 million next year with or without him.
So you just want to have dead money just sitting there? I just don't agree with it. I just think that.
And then clear it up after.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from First Things First, or go watch a few segments from our other shows on FS1.